I call the honourable member for Solomon.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to take a stand on behalf of the people of Darwin and Palmerston and put on the record my support for the Abbott Government's bill to reduce territory bills. The Abbott Government is committed to scrapping the carbon tax, and we will do everything in our power to see this through. Those on the opposition benches know that September's federal election was a mandate to scrap the carbon tax, to reduce the cost for businesses and households, boost jobs and manufacturing, and restore Australia's international competitiveness. Once the tax has been axed, Territorians can expect a reduction of average cost of living across all households of around $550 during the 2014-15 financial year, according to Treasury modelling. This government takes its election commitments seriously, and we will follow through with what we said, and that is we will axe the tax. We've already delivered on our promise to make the first item of legislative business in this new parliament the carbon tax repeal bill, and the Australian people know they can trust us at our word, and we do what we say. Last month, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Coalition Government asked for public consultation on the carbon tax repeal bills to keep in line with our election commitment. Unlike Labor, the Coalition engaged in proper consultation, as does any good government, to better understand whether the draft legislation should be further refined before being introduced into the parliament. We received hundreds of submissions. One of those worth particular mention is a joint submission from the Minerals Council of Australia in the Northern Territory Division. The first paragraph of this submission shows full support for the Coalition's plan. It states, "The repeal of the Clean Energy Act is an important first step in the development of a better, more sustainable climate change policy for Australia. The Australian minerals industry welcomes the Clean Energy Legislation Carbon Tax Repeal Bill." It goes further, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Clean Energy Act, referred to as the carbon tax, puts a dead weight on the Australian economy. It places a burden of around $1.2 billion on the minerals sector alone last year, an impost on a scale faced by none of Australia's mineral export competitors. This burden comes for no material environmental dividend. Repeal of the Clean Energy Act is necessary because its poorly designed response to the policy change. The minerals industry looks forward to engaging in the process of designing the direct action scheme to provide for a more efficient and effective approach. If the Territory's mineral industry is suffering under Labor's carbon tax, then this has a flow-on effect in terms of economic growth, jobs and prosperity. ConocoPhillips, operators of Darwin's LNG plant, also lodged a submission. Jack Griffin from ConocoPhillips, who's the Vice President of Legal and Corporate Affairs, says, "ConocoPhillips recognises and preferences the government's clear intention to repeal legislation ahead of the effective date June 30, 2014. However, where this is not possible, ConocoPhillips supports the government's position on a retrospective repeal." The two Labor federal members, the member for Lingiari and the Senator Nova Peris, need to listen to these organisations and consider the impact on the economy and on jobs of the carbon tax and support the government's repeal legislation. If they really do want to stand up for Territorians, then they should join us and axe the tax. Territorians are paying for Labor's tax failures as they need their parliamentary representatives to stand up and say enough's enough. Even before implementation of the carbon tax in 2012, the Minerals Council warned at least 1,500 Northern Territory businesses face a new 6.2 cents per litre tax on fuel under the Gillard Labor government's carbon tax. Additionally, they said analysis of national taxation statistics shows that the proposed carbon tax on fuel will impose an immediate direct cost on more than 60,000 individual businesses nationwide, not just 400 to 500 big polluters as claimed by the government. In the Territory, Mr Deputy Speaker, we've experienced price hikes of 10 cents to our power bills, 10% to our power bills since the tax was introduced. Small businesses has been hit even harder than domestic users because they pay a higher tariff on the households. Local government has also been hit hard. The City of Darwin pointed the finger fair and square at the carbon tax when announcing a hike in rates and rubbish collection costs. In the 2012-13 budget, the City of Darwin increased rates by 4.5%, and garbage and recycling collection fees were increased by a massive 17%. Overall, an average household paid 6.3% more in council fees than the year before, all because of the carbon tax. A local air conditioning company servicing Darwin and Palmerston has told my office the cost of replacing the refrigerant gas in a domestic air conditioner has increased from around $25 a kilo to around $100 a kilo since the carbon tax kicked in. Mr Deputy Speaker, that's an increase that the business would have never seen coming, and one the average consumer just has to swallow. NT Ice in Berrima is a major supplier of frozen water in the Territory. Its operator, Michael Coonan, tried to absorb the price increases that resulted from the hike in electricity prices caused by the carbon tax. He even spent $50,000 installing a 24 kilowatt solar system at his plant. His applications for assisted government funding were knocked back by the same Labor government that introduced the carbon tax which was supposed to encourage alternative energies. Then there's the case of Territory Auto Air Conditioning Company, who have also taken a carbon tax hit. In one case, Top End Northern Auto Air Conditioning wrote to its clients about an impending price increase. The letter said, "As one of your suppliers in air conditioning system repair and regassing, I must write to you today to advise you of the imminent refrigeration gas price increases. As part of the Gillard Labor government's carbon tax scheme, refrigerants will attract a new tax. This scheme is to be introduced on July 1st, 2012 and will see an unparalleled price rises with increases yearly as the carbon tax price ratchets up annually. R134A refrigerant for air conditioner systems in vehicles is expected to increase approximately 300% initially. The R404 refrigerant for fridges, freezers, etc. is expected to rise approximately 400 to 500%. These massive input price increases cannot be absorbed by Top End North Auto Air and will have to be passed on to the consumers. Territorians were hit again, Mr Deputy Speaker. So when the carbon tax first began in July 2012, the then Shadow Environment Minister, the now Minister for Environment, Greg Hunt, visited the electorate of Solomon, where he saw firsthand how local businesses were being affected and how they were losing money right from the word go. During his visit, Minister Hunt met with local business owner Mick Burns. Mick is a well-known businessman who, among other interests, has a crocodile farming business. At the time, Mick had around 60 to 70,000 crocodiles to feed and care for, and was quoted as saying, "Given the tyranny of distance, we have to freight the majority of our feed up, and our feed goes up to about 65 tonnes of feed a week for crocodiles. My food bill out there is close to $3 million a year, and when you get a 6 to 7% price increase, it's a pretty hefty cost, and I've got a long-term overseas contract that I can't increase. I can't pass on that cost, I just have to wear the cost increase." Mick was unable to pass on any of those immediate costs as he had a fixed contract, which didn't allow for a carbon tax price hike during the middle of the year. This was a huge hit to Mick's hip pocket, a cost that he will never ever be able to recover. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, crocodiles are big business in the Territory, as you know, and the carbon tax has had an indirect but very real flow-on effect to the producers like Mick Burns, who's helped support the livelihoods of hundreds of people in the Top End. And all this pain, Mr Deputy Speaker, for nothing. The carbon tax has not actually done what it was promised to do, and that is to clean up the environment and reduce carbon emissions. Instead of cleaning out the environment, the carbon tax instead is cleaning out the wallets of Territorian families. And that's not good enough, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I won't stand by and let this happen. I know my colleague and friend Senator Scullion, he'll be voting to get rid of the tax, but what we want to know is whether the member for Lingiari and whether Senator Peris will be also voting to axe the tax. Member for Lingiari saying no. He's in the chamber here saying no. So he's going to be letting Territorians down. Domestic emissions under the carbon tax continues to rise. It has completely failed to do the job it set out to do. The previous Labor government's own modelling, which it submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, shows that our emissions would increase under the carbon tax from around 560 million tonnes in 2010 to 637 million tonnes in 2020. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's estimated that the carbon tax will accrue at least $10 billion over 2 years, with domestic emissions not failing but rising. By any measure, this is yet another Labor bungled policy that was orchestrated by the Greens over there on the crossbenches, swallowed up in desperation by the former Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, and hung out around the neck of all Australians just to keep Labor in power. Well, meanwhile, Mr Deputy Speaker, countries around the world are reducing their emissions through policies that provide direct incentives to adopt new technologies that reduce emissions or improve energy efficiency. The coalition government will focus on measures that will actually cut emissions, like reforestation, cleaning up power stations, cleaning up waste landfill and waste coal mine gas. The Labor Party would rather burden families and businesses with an economy-wide tax that fails to reduce emissions and send industries offshore. Around the world, Mr Deputy Speaker, other countries are taking the direct approach initiatives, including the direct abatement purchasing, renewable energy targets, energy efficiency measures, appliance, building and vehicle fuel efficiency standards, measures in the agricultural, forestry and land sectors. It seems, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the Labor Party thought that they knew best and went directly against the grain and against the advice of industry, and certainly against the advice of industry experts and world leaders. But then this is where we are beginning to expect from these on the opposition benches, radical ideas with no community or industry consultation. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm here to stand against that, to stand up and say no to the tax that's fleecing Territorians of their hard-earned money. So the member for Lingiari has said that he won't be supporting the tax. Well, I hope that Senator Peris, who said that she'll be standing up for Territorians, I hope that she'll vote against, hope she votes with us and axes the tax, because Territorians have said to me they don't want this tax. So I say, Senator Peris, stand with me and vote for a real change in tackling climate change with proven measures and real results. Don't stand in the way of a fair go for Territory businesses. Don't stand in the way for jobs like the member for Lingiari is. Don't stand in the way for economic growth. And most of all, don't stand in the way of what Territorians want. They want us to axe the tax. So get on board, member for Lingiari.